Hi everyone, and welcome to Organizational Leadership 4000, the Transforming Self-Transformation Reflective Seminar. And you're almost at the end of the class. You've gone through most of the learning modules and you are almost ready to get planning that capstone project. This section of the course is devoted to Courthagen and Vasalos and the feedback loop between reflection and action. Part of the idea of this course is that you're looking at how you become a self-transforming, adaptive person, a leader who is able to deal with different kinds of schools of thought in the particular work process that you have to go through. So when you're looking at the Courthagen-Vasalos loop, take a look at parts 4 and 5, the idea that you're creating alternative methods of action and then you are able to try out different methods of action. You could also substitute their different schools of thought, different approaches to a particular problem at work. The idea is that you are becoming an adaptive learner, that you're somebody who's used this process of reflection to learn about how you learn, and then you're going to be able to learn different schools of thought. So for this particular learning module, you're going to be dealing with that particular notion of applying these theories to a film example in the discussion tool. So remember, the learning outcomes for our course deal with critically evaluating assumptions and values, expressing self-awareness, looking at self-awareness, critiquing your assumptions and beliefs, being able to figure out how you can self-transform, how you can learn about new schools of thought. And you're going to be doing some reflection, documenting belief systems and wider beliefs in communities and context. So think again about the Courthagen and Vasalos onion model. This is the model that talks about the idea of you as an individual, how you are able to analyze who you are, why you think what you think, and then thinking about the idea of your beliefs and the kinds of qualities that you have. If you're focusing on the part of this onion model that deals with competencies and behaviors, and then how that interacts with the environment, think about that idea of self-transformation. If you are developing the ability to adapt to new schools of thought and integrate new schools of thought into what you need to do in the job environment, your competencies are expanded and you have new behaviors, you have new ways of reacting to situations at work because you've become self-transforming. So use this kind of a model as a way of, inspiring yourself to think about the world in new ways, in different ways, and in more varieties. When you're looking at this idea of self-transformation through core qualities, this is the loop model from Courthagen and Vasalos again, with the filled-in extra information about questions that you can be asking yourself. So when you're thinking about part 3, what core qualities are needed, if you want to be a good leader, you're getting a degree in organizational leadership. Part of the idea of being a good leader is that you are able to integrate different ways of approaching a problem and thinking about how to mobilize those different ways of approaching problems. So you're becoming an adaptive learner and an adaptive leader. You're somebody who's able to deal with different kinds of interests that you'll be confronted with from different parties in whatever working experience you're going to have after you go through your degree program. So your discussion film examples, let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. The two choices for Organizational Leadership 4000 are Dances with Wolves and Working Girl. In the film Dances with Wolves, we meet a character named Lieutenant John Dunbar, and he's been assigned to the western frontier. He ends up having his belief systems challenged to a certain extent as he meets and interacts with a local Native American tribe. And so when you're looking at this idea of different schools of thought and becoming adaptable, consider how that character is adapting. Consider how he's making a new school of thought and being able to interact with different people and different communities. Likewise, in the other film choice, Working Girl, we see a character, Tess McGill, who is working as a secretary, but she ends up having an opportunity come up where her own creative ideas and her own new approach will end up being valued potentially by those who are working with her. And her own background, her own socioeconomic background, which may have been seen as a limitation, ends up becoming something through the course of the film that she is able to change and see the value in. When you look at the way in which she interacts with other people around her, think about the different schools of thought and the different approaches to problems that you see people using throughout the film. So when you're looking at the questions that you should deal with in the discussion tool as you describe your film choice, make sure that you're talking about the theories, assumptions, and schools of thought that the characters in the films have. Make sure that you're talking about the idea of how the main character changes over the course of the film. Sometimes people in film theory will talk about the idea of a character having a developmental arc that they go through. Look at the idea of the goals and desires that the person has. There's different ways in which characters are perceiving and, going after something that they want to achieve in a film. Do those things that they want to achieve change? When you're looking at the idea of how the main characters may grow, or have a new approach, have a new theory, see the ways in which that film may end up altering their place in the world and giving them a new insight, giving them a new kind of competency, a new kind of core quality that will end up being valuable for them by the end of the film. So, here's a literature overview and recap for Organizational Leadership 4000. We start out taking some inspiration from Sullivan and Rosen. In their work, Bodies of Knowledge, Disciplinary and Multidisciplinary Frameworks for Arguing and Knowing, one of the things that's important is that you end up looking at different frameworks for learning, and those frameworks are in dialogue with each other. There's ongoing argumentation between different schools of thought. In Kolb, we're looking at the idea of understanding heightened complexity. So we're taking a look at the idea of having a more complex point of view about the world around us, transacting with the world and being able to integrate different schools of thought into how we work with the world. In Fiddler and Marino, we're talking in this particular reflective seminar about the idea of building competences, developing reflective abilities, building reflective sensitivities and capabilities, and doing meaningful learning. So as we're looking at events and experiences and reflecting on them, we are having meaningful learning if we are able to integrate and deal with different schools of thought. In Keegan and Leahy's model, we're taking a look at stepping outside our current way of thinking and feeling, and we're trying to deal with those assumptions, and we're trying to shape those assumptions and beliefs in new ways. We're becoming a meta-leader, in other words, a leader who learns. So self-transformation involves leadership, and it involves the idea of being able to analyze and conceptualize different ideologies. In Korthagen and Vasalos, we were talking about the onion model and the idea of building those kinds of core competences that will end up being valuable for how you interact with the world around you. And we're looking at the idea of having that last phase of being able to experiment with new reflective behaviors, being able to experiment with different schools of thought. That's something that's valuable for someone who is working with leadership. Your final discussion topic for the course, which is due at the end of week 6, involves writing a discussion post talking about how this theory of leadership and learning relates to your degree program. So you're going to need to research the learning outcomes of your degree program in the course catalog and write about different schools of thought that you may end up having to work with as you are looking for your degree. You're going to be talking about any items and artifacts that show the learning you've achieved and the big picture of the field that you're in. And you're going to be talking a bit about this with other students in the course who are going through the same process, comparing with each other what you're doing. Great job, everybody. Thanks again for taking the class. Take care. Bye-bye.